Okay, so we are holding at the bottom of page 1326. Um, we can begin. mm, we can begin a little bit. Uh, Actually, we'll begin exactly from where we left off at 2 lines in the bottom of page 1326, the second page in your downloads, by the end of the line behind. And we were speaking about two types of ways of serving the Eibishter. One type of way which involves the Mesiris Nefesh, which involves beyond the body, the level of the Nefesh that's out, that's the Soiv Kalam of the Nefesh, what he calls it. And then there's a level of serving Hashem in a way of that modud or mugbal, that it's within the limitations of the body, etc. So now he explains that a little bit more practically, these two levels and these two ways of service, whether he does it in a way of Mesiris Nefesh, in a way that's not according to the limitations of the body, or that the limitations of the body have a certain type of impact. Not only is this fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs complete and perfect the way he's obligated to according to halachim, this would be called the revelation of the Mamal Kalam of the soul. Just like in the macro, in the big world, there's Mamal Kalam, the level of godliness that's tailored and limited and is enclosed in the world according to the level of the world that the world is able to take. So there's so too in the nefesh, there's a level of God, of the nefesh that becomes revealed within the limitations of the body. That is the obligations of doing Torah mitzvahs, the way it's enumerated in Shulchan Aruch, the way it's listed in Shulchan Aruch, and we're talking about a person that has that level for sure. The Mal Kalam of the nefesh, that he fulfills Shulchan Aruch b'shleimus, he does that. Not only does he fulfill the mitzvahs, just in the way you say in Yiddish, just to fulfill the obligation, but he's also mahader. He does it in an additional and more beautiful fashion. From the mahader min mahader until in the way that the Chazal used concerning Neiros Chanukah. Neiros Chanukah, to light, every single person should light, and in the way that they increase and add every single day, that's mahadrim, mina mahadrim. It's not just beautification of the mitzvah, it's the utmost level of beautification. This is the perspective as it is, the mahadrim, mina mahadrim, that's already the soiviv of the nefesh. That's the level of the soiviv that we're talking about now. That's a soiviv kalalmin, that's a level that's transcendent, that's comparable and has a relationship with the body. Similar to the idea of soiviv kalalmin, that even though it's soiviv, it's transcendent, it's encompassing, but the level of soiviv still relates to almin. It still relates to the world. That's why it's called soiviv kol almin. It is transcendent and encompassing in regards to and in comparison to the world. So the same thing is concerning this mahadrim mina mahadrim. The Rebbe speaks about in other places. Why is it that actually mitzvahs Chanukah is unique? In other mitzvahs, it comes out that when we do the mitzvah, there are those that do the basic mitzvah, there are those that do the mitzvah in a way of hidur mitzvah, and then there are those that do mahadrim mina mahadrim. But when it comes to Ner Chanukah, we find that everybody does in a way of mahadrim mina mahadrim, and the Rebbe connects it with the revelation that took place then on Chanukah. That was a very high revelation that had to do with the miracle of the the miracle of the candles being lit, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into it, but it's similar to what we just now said, that the doing mahadrin shabbat mahadrin, that's from the level of the soiviv shabbat nefesh. You say to Mizu, even more so does the person fulfill their obligations, both the beautification of the mitzvah. V'chein guf ha-mitzvah, and so to the actual body of doing the mitzvah itself, not just the beautification of the mitzvah. It's in such a manner that's beyond every type of measure and boundary. Even if it's more than a third. The Gemara speaks about that how much should a person pay to be mahader in the mitzvah. The person should pay up to a third. So in other words, let's say for an esrig, if a basic kosher esrig is, I don't know, whatever it is, $100, so you pay another $30 for a hider mitzvah. We see people don't do that. I'm just saying about that the idea of hider mitzvah is fulfilled with up to a third. But this person that is going in a way that's beyond measure and beyond boundary, so he doesn't limit himself to paying or expending only a third for the hider mitzvah. Since he's an approach of beyond all measure and boundary, because the revelation of the true soiviv that we were speaking about before, that there is the memali of the nefesh, then there's the soiviv of the nefesh that's like soiviv kolamin that still relates to the limitations of the body, and then there's the ultimate level, the highest most level, that's the soiviv hamiti, the true soiviv. From the perspective of the true soiviv, so even what Shulchan Aruch says is mahadir min mahadir, what Shulchan Aruch says how much to expend on the hider mitzvah and so on, breaks out of these barriers and boundaries. So ein shayach lasses cheshbonos. It doesn't. It's not even possible for him to make all types of calculations. Is it a third that he's spending on the hider, or it's more than a third? Because he's not in a place of limitations. He's beyond limitations, and the entire idea of numbers and calculations don't apply. It says, so too it's in tzedakah. The lawyer doctrine knows in tzedakah, not only does he give tzedakah the way he's obligated according to halacha, the Rebbe interestingly includes in the obligation of the halacha, he includes meiser v'chomish. You see this a lot of times when the Rebbe talks about the basic obligation, they'll say not just 10%, but they'll say 20%, even though normally we look at 10% as the minimum, and chomish is for mitzvah and amuvcha. You give 20%, you're really doing great. The Rebbe very often refers to like chomish as 20% as a given, and the truth is, from the way the Alter Rebbe the whole time pushes the idea of tzedakah and tanya and the idea of chomish and even more than chomish. So therefore, chomish now has been in a way downgraded. It's become now like a basic obligation of tzedakah instead of like just going beyond the letter of the law. The Rebbe says this person that's in touch with the soiviv ha'amiti, with the true level of going beyond boundaries, not only doesn't he limit himself to the halacha of 10% or 20%, not only does he give more than 20% for the sake of his healing of his soul, like it's explained in the Geras HaKodesh. Alter Rebbe explains how is it possible if the Chazal say that a person someone that expends, and the same thing Alter Rebbe says in the Geras HaTshuva, someone that gives away money for tzedakah, but there's a limit. He's not supposed to be mevazvez, he's not supposed to expend and give a lot of tzedakah, more than 20%. So the Alter Rebbe encourages to give more than 20%, especially the whole calculations of the fasts in the Geras HaTshuva, that you need to switch it over for tzedakah, because these days we don't have the capability to fast, so it'll be more than 20%. So the Alter Rebbe says you don't have to be worried. Why? The Chazal said not to give more than 20%. This is a 20% is when you're just giving tzedakah for the sake of tzedakah. But over here, going beyond the 20%, it is giving it for the healing of a soul. And he explains, just like when it comes to healing one's own body, Chas v'sholom, we shouldn't know of any severe illness or whatever, but a person would never put a budget and a limit on what they would spend on medication and on medical procedures and so on. Say, I'm sorry, I've just budgeted for this year X amount of money for medical expenses. I won't go beyond that budget. The Alter Rebbe says the same thing comes with the healing of the nefesh. Or if it was a nefesh, a person can't have a budget. The budget of 10 to 20% only applies in ordinary situations. But if I'm giving tzedakah to heal up my soul, there's no limits to it. So the Rebbe is going to say that this person that's in tune with the Soiviv Amiti, it's not just that he's giving more than 20% because of the refuas nefesh, as he's going to explain in the parentheses, because that itself is already a calculation. And someone that's in tune with the Soiv Amiti is not into calculation. Let's see it inside in the parentheses on page 1327. The second parentheses on the page, actually the fourth parentheses on the page. It's like the middle of the first paragraph. So even the idea of giving more than 20% for the healing of the soul, that itself is connected with calculations. Because the reason why it gives more than 20% is because the reason of the healing of the soul. So what is a tzedakah that expresses the soiviv hamiti, that expresses the true level of going beyond limitations? So he says, but rather because the yid, when the soiviv hamiti, when the true soiviv is revealed by him, he is in a movement and an approach of beyond measure and boundary whatsoever, not even the measure like soiviv kalamin, that it's only soiviv in relation to almin. From the get-go, initially, he doesn't even go into calculations and all types of limitations. So now the Rebbe is going to explain that these three things, the three things that we spoke about, the memal kalam of the nefesh, the soiviv kalam of the nefesh, and the soiviv hamiti, totally beyond any type of level, totally removed from the body, not having to do with the body whatsoever, not having to do with the calculations of the body whatsoever. It says these three things, number one, the first level, the level corresponding to the memal kalam of the nefesh, that's the avodah of with all your heart. That's the avodah. That's from the perspective of the soul, the way it's from a level that's enclosed in the body. Internally, it's the heart. It's something that permeates them. I think there's supposed to be an end parentheses over here. The second level, the level of the soiviv kalamin, of the relationship of the soul to the body, is avodah the b'chol nafshecha. And then, b'chol means with all your might. With all your might means totally without limitations, as we know that the level of Oid and Chassidus is always about believable without boundaries, any type of boundaries, not even just comparable to the body, but completely beyond their limitations. Avodah misad b'chinas soiviv hamiti, that's the avodah, that the last avodah that we are enumerating over here, that's a result of the true soiviv. Do as it's known, the Eden b'chol moedechol l'mayla magbolo l'gamri. That idea of with all your might is totally beyond boundaries. So therefore, it cannot even be the soiviv kalam of the nefesh, because the soiviv kalam of the nefesh still relates to a certain degree to the body, and therefore there is to a certain degree some limitations. The true idea of b'chol moedechol without boundaries whatsoever is the complete soiviv. Yes, Loimar, we could say gimel in yonim elu b'shorsham, that these three ideas of the mamal of the nefesh, the soiviv kalam of the nefesh, and the soiviv amiti that the person does, these are the three levels that's explained in many places, that the whole Seder Ishtalshalos falls under these three categories. There's mamal kalamin, obviously, mal kalam of the nefesh. Masoiviv kalamin, the way there's the oidus that transcend the worlds, but still have a connection with the world. Then there's kula kamei kalafshi. Then there's a level that everything before him is considered like nothing. They're completely insignificant. There is no existence seemingly before him. Ad bechinas lachshiv. There's a level that says kil lachshiv. It's considered as if it's nothing, and then it is lachshiv that it's considered nothing. Loira kil not only like nothing with a chaf that indicates that it's similar to, but elog la mamish. It's actually nothing. It's not. I like to explain in many places the idea behind being loch shiv. This is similar to what we say that in truth, lamayla yesh lamata ayin. Even though we always say that the creation is yesh me'ayin, that creation is we are the yesh, and we come from Hashem, who is from our perspective ayin. We do not comprehend him, but that's what's called das tachten from our perspective. But then there's the perspective from above. Hashem's perspective is the opposite. Hashem's perspective is that down here it's ayin, and he is the yesh. In other words, he is the yesh amit. He is the true existence, and down here it's ayin. That's kula kamei, not just kil lachashiv, but it's lachshiv, because since all of the world is only Hashem's breath and Hashem's letters, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya at length, therefore there is completely no significance to all the world. From that type of avodah, so then the boundaries of the world and the calculations of the world do not have any import, do not have any effect on the person's service of Hashem. Any questions? Okay, let us continue. The third page of your downloads, second paragraph. All of this was brought in to contrast and explain the difference between Tishrei and Nisan that we spoke about, that there's two types of approaches. There is the natural approach that the Eibishter created the world in a derech hateva, which is marked by Tishrei. That's when the nature of the world was created. And then there's Nisan, when Hashem chose in Yaakov and his children, and he made a month of redemption. In other words, that there's a totally different means of Hashem becoming revealed in the world, which is through miracles. Even though Hashem is revealed in the world through nature as well, like we brought from the Akedah, but that is not as open and can easily be denied and ignored. The Eibishter is functioning in the world through nature, and one has to think into it and see how even in nature there's the aspect of Hashem running the nature. That's why it's considered teva from the word tubu, that it's sunk in. But when it comes to nes is from the word that it's raised up high, it's beyond nature. So now the Rebbe is going to explain that back to our original topic about Rosh Hashanah versus Nisan, which is considered the head, which is considered the beginning of all the months. Like every good Jewish answer, the answer is both. Depends concerning what we're talking about. Pikal and argue, but according to all the above will be understood. Masha Tishrei or Rosh Hashanah, why Tishrei is the head of the year. Sheboinim Shachais Al Kol Hashanah Kula Gam Al Chodesh Nisan. Interestingly, it's not just the entire year comes from Rosh Hashanah. Even the month of Nisan, which in its own way is ahead, and in its own way the beginning of the year, Rosh Hashanah supplies the vitality for the month of Nisan. And the same thing the other way around. Also, Nisan is the head of months and it's the first for the months of the year. That also in Nisan comes down a life force and vitality for the entire year. Also for the month of Tishrei. That's why Tishrei is called the seventh month. Because of this, because it's the seventh from the first. So in other words, it's receiving from the head. So Tishrei, even though in one way it's a head, it's included in and receives its life force from the head, which is Nisan. And Nisan, even though in its own way, concerning its matter, it's a head, it also is included in the head of Tishrei and receives its life force from Tishrei. Why is that so? Because each one of the approaches of Teva versus Nes, and the same thing in our avodah, what he's going to talk about. Our avodah that we do within nature, within the limitations of the world, and our avodah of doing beyond nature, both of them, each one has an advantage over the other. Even Shesh Maila B'Teva. since there's an advantage in nature. And just like in the big picture, there's an advantage in nature, so too, so too in the service of a person, even though we spoke about the level of Soviv Amitin, the level of Soviv Kolalmin that's in the Nefesh, but even then, there is an advantage in the level of serving Hashem with the soul powers, the weights and clothed in the body. And that quality is Shein Benes. The advantage and the quality of nature is not to be found in the miracle. Yes, Milo Benes, and then there's an advantage in miracles, and that's in the big picture again, and also in the person Valderach Adam. So in the service of a person, there's an advantage in the service that's beyond measure and boundary, that's not to be found in nature. And therefore, each one of these two types of service needs to be included from and to receive from the other, because since each one has something else that the other one doesn't have, so Nisan needs to be part of the head of Tishrei, because the head of Tishrei includes all the life force, even of Nisan, and Tishrei needs to be part of the head and receive its life force from Nisan, because each one has something. That's the reason why Tishrei is the head and Nisan is also the head. The Tishrei must be a mile the Teva Gamba the Nisan. Tishrei influences and brings about the advantage of nature also in the avoid of Nisan. What does that mean? It says, also that service, which is represented by Nisan. What is that service? Of service that's beyond measure and boundary. Needs to be in an internalized fashion in such a way that it connects to the body and is associated with the body. And Nisan also influences and brings down the advantage of a miracle also in the avoid of Tishrei, meaning the Rebbe explains that also the avodah that's in a way that's enclosed in the body, in it should be permeated and should be felt the levels that's beyond the world and beyond the body. It's in other words, the Rebbe's approach always is that it's not, we don't live in two distinct worlds. Let's say Shabbos, we're out of this world, and during the week, we're in this world. No. During the week, we have to feel the effect of, let's say, Shabbos, which is about transcending the world. On Shabbos, it needs to inform us and impact us and be internalized within us to such a degree that when it comes the middle of the week, we know what to do with that transcendence of Shabbos. Otherwise, Shabbos becomes a totally separate experience, and we come to the week and we're totally lost. We don't have that Shabbos permeating us. The Shabbos has to relate to our physical world as well. Yes, that also has to do with the different physical activities we do at Shabbos and so on. So now the Rebbe is going to bring it back to what the Targum Yonason said about Yerach HaYisonim. Over there in Tanakh, it calls over there, the Tishrei calls the month of the old one. This is what it says, that the ancient ones called it, in other words, the month of Tishrei, the first month, used to be until the Eibishter chose Yaakov and his children, until the Geula of Nisan in 2448, the first month was entirely Tishrei. Okay, and now Tishrei is called the seventh month. Why this order that I was going to explain? Why did we start off? Tishrei was initially the only first, and then Nisan was introduced as a first as well. If both of them are valid, both approaches have to be. There has to be the approach of nature, and there has to be the approach that's supernatural, the approach of Nes. So why this order? Why did it start off first? Tishrei was the only first, and then Nisan. It says because in Avodah it's that way as well. In Avodah we need to work in such a type of level. First we work with engaging and dealing with the world, and then we go beyond. Say that Avodah Minakal, the order of the service is to go from the easy to the more difficult. Therefore, at the beginning of our avodah, atikayim, that means the old ones. That means at the beginning, Tishrei Yachidmam. Tishrei is the first month. Shuad Rosh, that becomes the head. Shaboy Nimshach Hansinas Koyach Ala Avodah Shem Didavak Bol. That in that month comes down the empowerment for the avodah. That's no way that's measured and limited. Top of the last page. After we already did and worked through the way we're supposed to do this avodah throughout all the months ad chodesh Adar, until we hit from Tishrei till the month of Adar. And Adar itself till the conclusion of the month, the final month of the month of Adar. In Ka'an, the Rebbe translates Ka'an not on Shlomo Melech's time, but Ka'an means what on the present date, when the Rebbe was saying this Sikha, which was the final Shabbos before this Maimer, the final Shabbos of the month of Adar. So he's saying Ka'an at this point, the Shabbos Achim the Chodesh Adar, the final Shabbos of the month of Adar, to Shabbos Mevarchim Nissen, and that year it was the Shabbos that was like final Shabbos of the month, the Shabbos that we benched the month of Nissen, which was also Shabbos Parsa Chodesh. When this year, when Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh come out together, so then that's when Shabbos Parsa Chodesh is. Other years where Rosh Chodesh is the middle of the week, so the final Shabbos and Varchim is when it's Parsa Chodesh. So now finally, after all the 6 months from Tishrei till now, we finally come to the avodah of Nissen that's beyond measure and boundary, because that's the progression. We go from the easy to the more difficult. In such a way that now Nissen becomes the head, even in regards to the month of Tishrei. That's why we say that now, when we hit Nissen, Tishrei now becomes the 7th in line, the 7th month. It's not number 1. Also, the avodah that's no way that's enclosed is influenced by and permeated from the idea it's beyond measure and boundary. But especially during the first of the month of Nisan, during Rosh Chodesh itself, that's even more so. The actual date of this month is for you. That's on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's when it's the revelation of, he points with his finger and he says, Zeh. That's why it's in the Rebbe's playing off the fact that it says HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. Why does it say HaChodesh Hazeh? Because they took out the Levana and showed it to him, because the idea of HaChodesh Hazeh is revelation, that it's pointed, that it's open. Let's finish the minor before time's up. And that's where it says this month for you is the head of months. The month of Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah Shabbai Nimshach Ha'inyan Danhagen Nisis Va'avodah Shalamayla Magbol. That in it comes down the idea of a miraculous way of running things. Now, avodah beyond limitation. I'll call you base Chodesh Hashanah. For all the 12 months of the year, we have that miraculous service. Where do we get the energy for it? Where do we get empowered from it? We get it from a month of Nisan. This is also the reason why it says this month. What's the significance of the word Zeh? Zeh, big amat v'yud bei. Zeh is 7, the Zayin is 7, Hey is 5, that's 12. 12 indicates the 12 months of the year, that all the 12 months of the year receive from this. Explain the that this is the power, the empowerment of Nisan for the rest of the year. They avoid from the Nisan through the avoid in the way of Nisan, that Nisan we said goes beyond boundaries. Especially when avoid is in a way, like we mentioned previously, yesterday we mentioned that he's going at first. Initially, he's already going above. Through that, we arrive at the level of Achodesh Hazeh. The revelation of the level of Zeh. In other words, he could point with his finger and say this. Until it be twice Zeh, like it will be when Mashiach comes. Then we will say twice Zeh. Like it says in the Pasuk, behold, this is our God, this is Hashem, that we hope to. What is the significance of twice Zeh? So the Rebbe says, the base bomb Zeh, who base bomb Kitoiv. The 2 times Zeh is like twice that it says On Tuesdays, it says twice Kitayv. Huchbot Kitayv, it was repeated Kitayv twice. Kitayv v'zeh shayachim zeh, because the word Toiv and Zeh are connected to each other. Because according to Kabbalah, the Toiv with the Tiferes, the level of Toiv, good, is the sphere of Tiferes. V'zeh was Zois is Malchus Zeh, and Tiferes the central part of Zeh. So therefore, Zeh and Toiv are connected. Since all the revelations of Mashiach's times are dependent in our actions and service now, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, also these days, not just when Mashiach comes, there's the idea of the revelation of the level of Zeh. This is the signs and miracles and wonders that tzaddikim perform. That is the nisan, the beyond nature that becomes revealed. Especially the way the Frierdiker Rebbe revealed, and he said that they should make this well known. That the way the Marash acted was in the way of the Baal Shem, meaning totally beyond nature. Similarly, this is what is reflected also in the service of a Yid. And we have to have this avoid of self-sacrifice, a complete devotion to Hashem, that's totally beyond any type of measure and boundary in continuation of the Rebbe Marash. Should be the will of Hashem. Shabbos mevarchim nisim from the Shabbos, so we bench the bunch of nisim. Shabbos achod, Parshas Chodesh. Navi ba'ifn del chatchila arib al agula, we should come in the way initially over to the redemption. Be b'chinas nisim. The redemption is a level of nisim, which is the beis nunin. There's two nuns in the word nisim, indicating a double miracle. Nisim nasaloi. Miracles and miracles will occur to him, like the Chazal say that if someone sees that word in a dream. Even the preparations for redemption should be in a way of a miraculous, beyond the world way. Until when it comes Chag Pesach, we'll already be. And even before that, we should already find ourselves in the Holy Land, the Holy City of Shalim, and the Holy Mountain. Yes, Mashiach Tzidkenu and Mamish in the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu speedily in our day. Any questions?